Hi, my name is Carrie Kreisworth. I grew up in New York. I'm a huge New York Mets fan, born and bred. We'll never let them down, never let them be. We'll always support. And it's really allowed me a sense of rooting for the underdog. I find that that's really a thread I've noticed in my life, rooting for a losing team. You have to really appreciate the agony of defeat and the little wins where you can get them, which actually was really helpful when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I have a very strong family history, which I knew. My mother's mother and her two aunts had both breast cancer and ovarian cancer and all passed away around the ages of 42 and 43. So again, significant history in my family, get checked all the time. And then my mother was encouraged by her OBGYN to get a genetic test for BRCA, for BRCA. For those who are not aware, it raises your probability for both breast and ovarian cancer. And my mother did have a genetic test done, and she was positive for the BRCA1 genetic mutation. From there, my sister and I have a twin sister, fraternal. We both got tested. I had a very strong feeling that I would be positive for the gene. She felt that she was going to be positive for the gene. I won, let's just say. And from there, it was a lot of surveillance. A lot of people asked me why I didn't get a prophylactic or preventative mastectomy at the time. I feel like maybe if I knew then what I know now, perhaps that would have changed, but that wasn't my personal path. And after surveillance of MRIs and mammograms, a few years later, my breast cancer was discovered in an MRI. And I had stage 1 invasive ductal carcinoma, and it was triple negative breast cancer, which is a particularly aggressive and hard to treat cancer. So when you get to a 5-year mark, 5-year post-diagnosis, it is a significant milestone. And I chose to celebrate by running the New York City Marathon, which is not something I ever anticipated doing in my life, but I felt like it was throughout any very difficult journey or challenging journey or experience, you really do, it's really important to find those little wins and find the places where you can have control, because so much of what's happening is out of your control. And I wanted to kind of honor my body and thank my body for all that we had been through and put myself through that rigorous training. And all I was focused on was starting at the start line healthy, finishing at the finish line healthy, which is what I did. So I'm very proud of myself. So after I was diagnosed, I talked to a lot of different people about various surgeries and reconstructions. I may have talked to maybe too many people, as my family would say, but I just wanted to know what I was getting into. I landed on doing what's called a deep flap. And so basically using your own tissue so the mastectomy is removal of the breast tissue, and then the reconstruction is building back up the breast. A lot of people do that through implants, and I use my own skin from my abdomen. So that was a very important piece for me, because psychologically I felt like this was still me, and that was just a very vital part of all of this. And again, taking control where I could. So after my diagnosis and then my surgery, before I had chemo, I actually froze my eggs just to plan for a family if I was going to have one someday, and I still have those eggs frozen. So that was also just, kind of a comedy of errors, because I didn't have a partner. I was doing all this on my own. When you're going through fertility treatment, for anyone who knows, it really, it really affects you both in mind and body. And, I was doing this all on my own. I had a 20-inch scar across my waist. So where you're supposed to put the needle, I really couldn't get to those places because I had nerve pain here. I couldn't turn, all of these things, and I cried through it all. And then I reminded myself that I had the option to do this, and what a beautiful thing that is. And then I had chemo for a while, and And then a couple of years later, because I'm BRCA positive, I had my ovaries and fallopian tubes removed to reduce the possibility of getting ovarian cancer, which was tough because it put me into a surgically induced early menopause, and I kept my uterus on the off chance that I could carry a child. So, was I surprised when I received the diagnosis? Yes and no. I always felt that there was kind of this thing hanging over, so I wasn't terribly surprised. I actually don't remember if I cried. I don't think that I did. I think I just went into a mode of, well, this is it and this is what I need to do. And I was grateful in a way that it was me and not my sister, because I could have some control over what I was going to do and how I was going to handle this moving forward. How did the people around me deal with it? I think it was harder on them in a way to see me go through so many different things. It's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, a lot of this affects someone you love physically, but you really can't plan for the emotional and the mental and the psychological impact that it has. I have a very supportive family and friends. I have a huge support system, but I think this was just very hard on them. And I feel even today, several years later, I still have, I don't know if it's guilt or shame, but I still feel bad that they had to put their lives on hold for me in a way. But I was so grateful that they showed up. For example, when I was diagnosed, I didn't live near my family at the time. So I was diagnosed, and my brother and my twin sister came up that night to meet me so they could go to an appointment with me to figure out what we do or what I do the next day. And I was so naive. I was so naive. And I thought, if they tell me I need to have a double mastectomy, I'm going to lose it, because I felt very connected to my breasts. I felt like they were part of my identity, and I couldn't see a world where I didn't have them. And I didn't know then what I know now. And I remember walking out of that doctor's office after learning all of the facts. Of course, I'm going to have a mastectomy. I mean, this was the answer right in front of me. And I just remember locking arms with my brother and my sister, and we were in the parking lot of the hospital and just kind of falling to my knees and being so overwhelmed, because then I cried. And you feel like you're watching someone else's life, from above, and you're kind of going through the motions. But I think my family and my friends handled this and my diagnosis as best as they possibly could. The biggest challenge I face from diagnosis until now was really reconnecting with my body. I had a very, very difficult time, and I didn't realize it immediately. We all look at ourselves in the mirror. We do it, it's human nature. I realized I wasn't looking at myself. And then one day I realized this and thought, oh. It took me a while to notice that, and when I did, I couldn't unnotice it. And I really needed to pay attention to why this was, what I could do to reconnect, to really understand or figure out who I was, who Carrie was post-diagnosis. Because you go through all these things, it's like a checklist. The diagnosis, the surgery, the chemo, treatment, all of these things, and then go live your life. So how do you do that? There's no guidebook, there's no manual. There are people who have been through this, and it's so helpful to get some guidance, but every person's experience is different. And this was mine, and this was my path, and I am happy to say that I have reconnected with my body, and I feel very proud and very confident in my own skin. But the biggest challenge for me was really feeling like I was in someone else's body, and I just didn't know how to be me again and move forward. I felt very stuck, and then became unstuck. How did I become unstuck? I went to therapy. I started exercising more. I left a toxic work environment, which was also part of some depression and anxiety I faced post diagnosis. It's very difficult to navigate a world after you've gone through all this because I think the biggest misconception with a lot of people is, okay, you're done now. And while breast cancer and my experience doesn't define me, it is a very significant part of me. And it's always here in some capacity. And I think that's very difficult for people to understand. So continuing to navigate that was difficult. But all of the things that you would think, the meditation, therapy, exercising, just recommitting to myself and loving my body. I think I felt so disconnected for so long that I needed to take steps. It was on me, nobody else. It's like happiness is an inside job. It was my responsibility, nobody else's responsibility to make me feel better and make me feel connected. And, I like to say that baby steps are still steps. You're still moving forward. And as long as you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're going to be okay. And sometimes it feels like that one step forward, two steps back. Keep going. One of the best lessons I learned from diagnosis until now is you have to heal before you can help. That there's a difference between a wound and a scar. And I didn't feel that or understand it right away. And as I got further out from diagnosis, it made sense. You want to just move forward. You want your life, or you want to get back to a life. That's not what it's about. It's a different life now, and that's okay. I think, sometimes we try to fit ourselves square peg, round hole, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you're not the same person. There are parts of you that are still the same, but you've just experienced these traumatic events that are going to have an impact. So utilize what you've learned from that and be able to move forward, but it's okay if that's not right away. And I think patience, understanding my body in a way that I never had before, and to ask for help. I know it's so cliche, but it doesn't matter how quote unquote strong or brave you are. It's still strong and brave to ask for help. Just because you can do something on your own doesn't mean you have to. So one of the things I am having trouble navigating is dating, and where do I go from here? I think for so long I felt that it took me so long to reconnect with myself that there is a huge trust in letting someone else in. But I miss intimacy. I miss having a partner. I also need to think about what I'm doing with the frozen eggs. And I'm kind of at this inflection point of where do I go from here, which is also another example of this train doesn't stop. I was diagnosed with breast cancer several years ago, yet what happened is still impacting my life now. And that's okay, but it's still challenging, and that's just part of my experience. How I wish some people were more empathetic about those who've been impacted by cancer is listen and be able to say, you know what, I'm not really sure what to say, and I'm not really sure what to do because I don't want to say the wrong thing, which I appreciate so much more than someone saying, you're so lucky. Or I also have a really hard time with the fighting analogies, the likeness to won, lost, battle. I maybe that doesn't affect other people, but when you say someone lost their battle, it's you're taking away that integrity of what that person went through, experienced, and who they were. And I think that it would be really helpful if people just educated themselves a little more and really spoke to the people in their lives who were impacted by cancer and say, I don't know what to say. How can I help? Although sometimes that's putting the the onus on the person, but it's showing someone that you're interested in, that you want to be intentional and you want to be thoughtful about how you want to support. I think people also come from a place of their own experiences, and that's not surprising. But I think ways in which people can be more empathetic is to educate themselves. There's information everywhere, what not to say, and just listening or asking their friend, loved one, family member, how can I show up for you? How can I support you? And I think I would say just don't negate my experience. Like this, like I said, this doesn't define me, but this is part of me. And I would really appreciate if you respected that. One of the things that I wish someone had said or did was, no decision you make will be wrong. And that did come from someone, but it was later. But I wish that I had heard it when I was making these decisions and in the moment, because you feel so overwhelmed that all of a sudden you're in this club that nobody wants to be in, but you need to make decisions and move forward. You need to educate yourself very quickly, understand acronyms and words you never knew, and that becomes your life for a while. And it's so incredibly overwhelming. I felt like any decision was so heavily weighted that I was putting so much pressure on myself, to the point where my family was having side conference calls because they were worried that it was taking too long for me to make a decision. Because a lot of people either they get one opinion or a second opinion. I went to 5 people, and it's not just 5 breast surgeons. I went to 5 plastic surgeons as well. And I think it just would have been helpful and given me some peace of mind. And I try to share that advice now for people who are newly diagnosed or haven't necessarily made their treatment plan. Like, no decision you make will be wrong. Because even if, let's say, it doesn't go the way you want, or you get an infection, there will always be a plan B. There will always be something else that you can do. There's always going to be a solution. And I think reiterating that, because it feels so heavy and it feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you must make these decisions. And you can ask people for help and they can give their support and opinions and educated findings. But at the end of the day, the decision is yours. For someone who's newly diagnosed, I would say you are not alone. You have an incredible support system that doesn't necessarily need to be the family you were born into. That can be chosen family. That could be various organizations that have communities throughout the country and throughout the world. Your experience matters. What you're going through matters. You matter. Your story matters. And you do not have to go through this alone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yay, that was great.
Thanks.